is an essential part of eating. Tastes identify as pleasant, boost our appetite, and anything that is bitter or sour warn us that we are about to swallow may be poisonous. Both of these aspects of taste depend on around 10,000 tiny taste detectors called taste buds that are on the surface of the tongue. Look at the tongue in a mirror and you will see that its surface is covered with tiny bumps or papillae. Of the three types of papillae, mushroom shape, big with a ridge, and spiky, only the first two house the taste buds. As food is manured by the tongue, its smaller molecules, such as sugars or salt, dissolve in the watery saliva and flows into the taste buds. Here, they are detected by receptor cells which send signal to taste centers in the brain that allow us to distinguish the 5 basic tastes, that is sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and savory umami. Spiky papillae lack taste buds, but their rough tips allow the tongue to grip food, including the slippery ice cream that you may eat. They also sense heat, cold, touch, pressure, and even the pain caused by eating hot peppers. It's these sensations combined with taste and smell that give us the appreciation of flavor. And as anyone with a bad cold will testify, smell is the senior partner. Without the sense of smell, flavor are just plain bland. The first thing that you do when you eat is to bite, using your beautiful teeth. Unlike pythons or pelicans, we humans cannot swallow our meal in one big gulp. Food must be broken down into smaller pieces before it can be swallowed. Performing this opening act of digestion is the chewing machine armed with teeth, powered by muscles and lubricated by saliva. A 32-piece dental toolkit, an upgrade from a 20-piece childhood version, deals effortlessly with our electric diet. Chisel-shaped incisors slide past each other to chop and slice food. Pointed canines grip, pierce, and tear. Premolars with broad crowns and twin cusps or peaks crush and chew. And massive multi-cusped molars lock together to grind the food into smaller pieces. To withstand years of chewing, a tooth must be hard-wearing and firmly anchored. The white exposed part of the tooth, the crown, is covered by enamel, the body's hardest material. Incredibly strong yet lifeless, enamel is underpinned by living, bone-like dentine. This also forms the tooth's root, which slots into a socket in a jawbone where it is cemented firmly in place. With dentine, the pulp cavity contains blood vessels that supply food and oxygen to the cell in the living tooth tissue and nerves which provide the sensation. Connecting crown to the root, the neck of the tooth is gripped by the gums, a tight collar that prevents disease-causing bacteria from gaining access to the root. The aroma, the sight, and now the taste of food have already triggered a release of saliva into the mouth along ducts that lead from 3 salivary glands. Every day, some 2 or 3 pints, that's 1 to 1.5 liters of saliva, mostly water with a dash of mucus, germ-killing lysosome, and starch-digesting enzyme amylase trickle into the mouth cavity to keep it moist and disinfected. But at mealtime, the slow trickle turns into a flood that, in a turmoil of chewing, is mixed with food fragments by curling, twisting tongue. Slippery mucus in the saliva glues food particles together, lubricating them for a smoother passage down the throat. At the same time, amylase begins the chemical transformation of the starchy elements of the meal into sugar, a job made more efficiently by shredding and grinding of food into smaller pieces. Once food has been thoroughly chewed, the tongue sculpts it into an easy-to-swallow lump or bolus and pushes it to the back of the throat for the next stage of the journey. Swallowing starts when the tongue forces the slippery food bolus into the throat and triggers an unstoppable sequence of events. The throat muscle contracts and propels the bolus into the esophagus, the tube that leads to the stomach. The 3 other possible exit routes are blocked. The vulva, the fleshy projection that dangles over the throat's entrance, lifts upwards to stop the food intruding into the nasal cavity. The tongue, still pushing backward, prevents an unwanted return of food to the mouth cavity, and as the breathing temporarily ceases, the larynx rises and its hinged cover, the epiglottis, flaps downwards to block the airway to the lungs and prevents choking. It isn't gravity that gets the food from the throat to the stomach. The esophagus actively pushes the bolus. It can do this because it has the same basic structure as the rest of the alimentary canal. The tube that runs from the mouth to the anus. Its lining secretes mucus to reduce friction. Wrap around the circular muscles, contract behind the bolus and relax in front of it to force it downwards. The resulting wave of contraction and relaxation, called peristalsis, gets food from the throat to the stomach in just 6 seconds. So powerful and gravity-defying is peristalsis that food will reach the stomach even if you choose to eat upside down. The stomach is basically a bag between the esophagus and the small intestine. Its lining secretes an acidic digestive fluid called the gastric juice, and its wall contains not 2 but 3 layers of muscle, longitudinal, circular and oblique, each oriented in a different direction. Powerful contractions of these muscles churn food, mix it with gastric juices and pushes it towards the stomach's exit. As this happens, the entrance of the stomach closes to prevent the food and acid from traveling back up the esophagus. And at its exit, a ring of muscles called the pyloric sphincters contract to prevent the food from flowing into the duodenum. Duodenum is the first section of the small intestine until the processing is completed. In addition to digesting the food, the stomach also gives it a temporary home. The stomach's wall is remarkably elastic, allowing it to expand considerably. Without this holding area, food would actually be forced into and along the small intestine far too rapidly for efficient digestion to take place over there. As food arrives from the esophagus, peristalsis moves it towards the opposite end of the stomach, where the most vigorous churning, kneading, and mixing of the food with gastric juices take place. After several hours of processing, the pyloric sphincters relaxes slightly and contraction of the stomach muscles pumps small squirts of a soupy mix of partially digested food, now called the chyme, into the duodenum. The pyloric sphincters also acts as a filter. It closes automatically if large food particles attempt to pass through it, ensuring that only liquid chyme reaches the duodenum. Those large particles are dispatched backwards for further digestion. Every day, gastric glands deep inside the stomach lining make 4 pints, that's 2 liters of corrosive liquid, and release it through millions of holes called gastric pits. Cells halfway down the glands produce the ingredients for hydrochloric acid, although they aren't combined until they have been secreted into the gland itself. Deeper down, other cells release an inactive enzyme called pepsinogen. This is converted by hydrochloric acid to an active enzyme called pepsin. The only digestive enzyme to work best in an acidic condition is pepsin, and this accelerates the breakdown of proteins in the food. To avoid digesting itself, the stomach mounts a spirited defense. Lining cells produce a thick mucus coating that prevents contact with the gastric juices. Any damaged cells are rapidly replaced, and each week the entire lining is actually renewed. However, the destructive properties of the gastric juice are put to good use by killing most of the disease-causing bacterium that enter into the body through the food and drink. The thought, sight, and smell or taste of food causes the brain to signal the stomach to get ready for a delivery by release of the extra gastric juice and contracting its muscular walls. As the stomach empties, both the secretion and the contraction decreases. Packed inside the abdomen, the small intestine is the longest and the most important part of the digestive system. After leaving the stomach, the well mashed out but barely digested food is moved along the 20 feet, that is 6 meters of small intestine, no more than 1 inch, that's around 2.5 centimeters wide. Along the way, it is stripped of its nutrients, leaving just watery waste to be dumped into the large intestine. In the course of that journey, 2 things happen. First, the food molecules are completely digested by an array of enzymes that breaks them down into basic building blocks. Second, these building blocks, particularly glucose, amino acids and fatty acids, are absorbed into the bloodstream and dispatched for use by trillions of body cells. Digestion without enzymes would be like a football game without players. No action, no results. Enzymes are proteins that speed up by thousands or even millions of times the rate at which chemical reactions, both inside and outside the cells, take place. Each kind of enzyme is suited for one type of chemical reaction. In the alimentary canal, the digestive enzyme breaks down big food molecules into smaller ones. They do this by accelerating a chemical reaction that uses water molecules as a scissor to cut up big molecules. As a result, a meal is soon reduced to simple components. Without enzymes, this process would have been impossible. In this illustration, a molecule made of 2 amino acids needs to be split. First, the molecule attaches itself to the right enzyme, fitting like a key in a lock. A water molecule is then inserted to break the bond between these 2 amino acids. Once they are liberated, the enzyme, unchanged by the whole process, is free to repeat the process with another identical molecule. Short but busy are the words that aptly describe the duodenum, the first loop of the small intestine. It's here that the chyme from the stomach is prepared for the final phase of digestion. The other glands start to play a role, the liver and the pancreas, the products of which, bile and pancreatic juice respectively, empty into the duodenum. Both the liquids are alkaline, and when they mix with the newly arrived chyme, they transform it from highly acidic to just alkaline. This change is essential because the battery of digestive enzymes that operate in the small intestine will work only in a slightly alkaline environment. Furthermore, without the ingredients contained in the bile and the pancreatic juice, digestion in the small intestine would grind to a halt. Roughly the size of a kiwi fruit, the gallbladder is a muscular bag that stores, concentrates and releases bile, a greenish liquid made by the liver to which it is connected. When chyme arrives in the duodenum, the gallbladder contracts and squeezes its content into the common bile duct. Bile contains bile salts. In the small intestine, these bile salts convert large fat globules into tiny droplets that are much more easily broken down by fat digesting enzymes. Clusters of cells inside the pancreas make pancreatic juice, which is released into the duodenum through the opening shared with the common bile duct. Pancreatic juice contains enzymes that break down carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and nucleic acid. Much like pepsin in the stomach, the enzymes that break down proteins are activated only in the duodenum to prevent them from destroying the cells that made them. Thanks to the considerable length, the small intestine has plenty of time to both break down food and to absorb its products. Its surprisingly large internal surface, produced by folds and villi, also play an important role in the process. Running around the inside of the small intestine, circular folds slow the flow of chyme, creating more opportunity for digestion and absorption. Slimy with water and intestinal juice, these folds are covered by millions of tiny projections called villi that provide the location for both the final stage of digestion and the absorption of its products. As in the esophagus, but not with such power, peristalsis moves food along the small intestine. In addition, contraction of circular muscles in sections of the small intestine produces an effect called segmentation that sloshes chyme back and forth, mixing it with the pancreatic enzymes and bringing it into contact with villi. The tiny villi that projects from the lining of the small intestine each have tiny projections of their own. A microscopic view of the surface of the epithelial cells covering a villus resembles a mass of microvilli. At Attached to these microvilli are the enzymes that complete the digestion of fats to fatty acids, has already been achieved by the pancreatic juice enzymes. By providing a massive surface where digestion and absorption of the end products can happen side by side, microvilli greatly increase the efficiency of both these processes. Inside each villus is a network of blood capillaries and a branch of the lymphatic system. Glucose and amino acids are absorbed into the capillaries and carried off to the liver for processing. Fatty acids are reassembled into fats and passed into the lymphatic vessels before being deposited into the bloodstream. Villi also absorb most of the water contained in the food. Saliva, gastric juice, and other secretions, as well as the bile salts that aided fat digestion, which, as an act of good housekeeping, are sent back to the liver for recycling. By the time food reaches the end of the small intestine, all that is left is a watery mix of indigestible matter and dead intestinal cells. Peristalsis periodically pushes this waste through a non-return valve into the large intestine, the last section of the alimentary canal. Twice as wide as the small intestine, but only 1/4 of its length, the large intestine provides the route through which the solid waste exits the body. It starts with a short pouch, the cesium, and continues as the colon. The large intestine actually frames the small intestine, rising up the right side of the abdominal cavity, crossing beneath the stomach and descending on the left side to join the sigmoid colon. Here, waste is temporarily stored before being discharged to the rectum, which opens to the outside world. The colon's layer of longitudinal muscles is confined to 3 external bands that, when partially contracted, pulls the colon into pouches. There is obviously a change in the terrain as we move from the small to the large intestine. Gone are the circular folds and the villi, reflecting the fact that the colon, that is the longest section of the large intestine, has no digestive role. Instead, its job is to propel the waste material towards the anus so that it can be pushed out of the body. During that journey, water is absorbed through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, an action that helps the body avoid dehydration and makes the once watery waste, now called fecus, semi-solid and more manageable. Warm and wet, the colon is an ideal home for trillions of bacteria that usually live in peace with their host. Bacteria manufacture the substance that gives fecus their characteristic odor and use converted bile pigments to color the fecus brown. This also works on waste to release sugar and vitamins that we can use. Usually, the muscular contractions of the wall produces a slow, sluggish movement of the fecus that allows time for water to be absorbed. But 3 or 4 times a day, triggered by the arrival of food in the stomach, a powerful wave of peristalsis called a mass movement forces fecus into the sigmoid colon, where they are stored until liberated by defecation. During the 12 to 36 hours it takes from this to get from the cesium to the anus, each pound, that's 450 grams of watery waste, is converted to 5 ounce, that's around 150 grams of fecus. Up to half of that weight is made up of living and dead bacteria. The final act of the digestive process is familiar to all of us. It is defecation, the elimination of feces along with the rectum and the short anal canal and out through the anus. Surrounding the anus are 2 sphincters that act as drawstrings. The internal anal sphincter is controlled automatically. The external one does what you tell it to do. Unless its owner is a baby or a toddler, they need diapers because they have not yet learned how to control their external sphincters. Once